Peace was never your inheritance. It was not handed to you in quiet moments or taught through gentle voices. Instead, you learned early how to read a room, how to measure silence, how to sense emotional shifts before words were spoken. Home did not feel like rest, it felt like rehearsal. You adapted, not because you were weak, but because you had to survive. While others learned how to dream, you learned how to endure. And that endurance shaped you, sharpened your awareness, strengthened your restraint, and quietly exhausted your soul. You were raised by patterns, not protection, by tension that lingered in the air, by expectations that were never clearly spoken, yet always enforced. You became older than your age, wiser than your years, carrying responsibilities that were never meant for your shoulders. You learned to stay composed while storms passed through the walls, to remain calm while your inner world stayed alert. That was not peace. That was training. And now, as an adult, you may wonder why stillness feels unfamiliar, why calm feels undeserved, why rest feels temporary. It is because chaos taught you first. But this speech is not about blame, and it is not about anger. It is about recognition, about finally naming what shaped you, and understanding that awareness is not weakness. It is the beginning of choosing something different. When survival replaced safety, safety was supposed to be your foundation, but it never truly arrived. Instead of being held by reassurance, you were surrounded by unpredictability. The atmosphere you grew up in did not teach you how to relax. It taught you how to remain alert. Your nervous system was trained, quietly and relentlessly, to scan for emotional shifts, changes in tone, unspoken moods. Long before you understood what anxiety was, your body already knew it. You learned that peace was temporary, but tension was reliable, and so survival stepped in where safety should have lived. As a child, you did not wake up thinking about growth or joy. You woke up prepared, prepared to adjust yourself, prepared to behave correctly, prepared to avoid becoming a problem. You learned that being observant was safer than being expressive, that silence could protect you more than honesty ever would. While others were taught that home is where you rest, you learned that home is where you stay ready, ready to respond, ready to retreat, ready to endure. This was not strength by choice, it was strength by necessity. You became skilled at reading people without being taught how to read yourself. You could sense discomfort before it was spoken, anger before it was named, disappointment before it was acknowledged. These skills looked like maturity from the outside, but they were born from pressure. You were praised for being strong, yet no one asked why you needed to be strong in the first place. Survival disguised itself as responsibility, and you carried it with quiet discipline. In that environment, your emotions did not disappear. They went underground. There was no space to process fear, sadness, or confusion, so you learned to postpone them. You told yourself, later, later when things calm down, later when it's safe, later when I'm older. But later kept moving further away. Survival does not allow emotional pauses, it demands constant readiness, and so you kept going, even when you were tired in ways you could not explain. What makes this especially difficult is that survival was rewarded. You were acknowledged for coping, for holding yourself together, for not needing much. But the truth is, needing less was not a virtue. It was a defense. You learned to minimize your needs because expressing them felt risky. Not because anyone explicitly told you not to, but because the environment made it clear there was no room for fragility. So you adapted. You always adapted. Over time, this adaptation became your identity. You stopped asking what you felt and focused on what was required. You became functional, dependable, composed. But beneath that composure lived a constant tension, a quiet belief that something could go wrong at any moment. Even in calm, your body stayed alert. Even in silence, your mind stayed busy. This is what happens when survival replaces safety. Rest begins to feel unfamiliar, and peace feels undeserved. This is why, even now, slowing down may make you uncomfortable. When things are quiet, your instincts may not relax. They may search. Search for the next issue, the next responsibility, the next emotional shift. You may feel uneasy when nothing is demanded of you because your worth was once measured by how well you managed pressure. Calm feels strange when chaos was your teacher. But understand this clearly. There is nothing broken about you. What you carry is not a flaw, it is a history. Your reactions make sense in the context of what you endured. You were shaped by an environment that required awareness over ease, endurance over expression. Survival taught you how to stand, but it never taught you how to sit in peace. This keynote is not about condemning the past, it is about recognizing its imprint, because you cannot release what you refuse to acknowledge. Survival helped you grow up, but it does not have to define how you live now. Awareness is where the shift begins. When you finally see that you were trained for endurance, not comfort, you stop blaming yourself for finding peace difficult. Safety can be learned later. Calm can be practiced. Rest can be reclaimed. But first, you must honor the truth. You did not fail to find peace. Peace was never shown to you. And realizing that is not weakness. It is the first quiet step toward choosing something better. Love that came with conditions. Love, in its purest form, is meant to be steady. It is meant to exist without negotiation, without performance, without fear of withdrawal. But the love you grew up with was not steady. It was selective. It appeared when expectations were met and faded when they were not. You learned this lesson early, not through direct instruction, but through patterns. Approval arrived when you behaved a certain way. Warmth followed obedience. Silence or distance followed honesty. And slowly, without realizing it, you began to associate love with conditions. As a child, you adapted by becoming careful. You paid attention to what pleased others and adjusted yourself accordingly. You learned which parts of you were acceptable and which parts needed to stay hidden. This was not manipulation, it was survival. When love feels uncertain, the child does not rebel. The child studies. You studied reactions, moods, rules that were never written but always enforced. You learned how to earn closeness instead of expecting it. Over time, this taught you a dangerous lesson, that your value was tied to your usefulness, your compliance, your ability to meet emotional demands. You were not loved for simply being. You were acknowledged for performing correctly. And because children naturally want connection, you accepted that system without question. You told yourself that love is something you work for, something you maintain through effort and restraint. You stopped seeing it as something you deserve by default. This conditioning did not end with childhood. It followed you into adulthood, quietly shaping your relationships. You may find yourself overgiving, over-explaining, overcompensating, not because you lack confidence, but because you were taught that affection can disappear without warning. You may feel uneasy when love is offered freely, suspicious when no demands are attached. When love comes without conditions, it can feel unfamiliar, even uncomfortable. You may also struggle with boundaries, not because you do not understand them, but because boundaries once felt like a risk. Saying no felt like rejection. Expressing needs felt like ingratitude. You learned to prioritize harmony over honesty, connection over self-expression. And while this kept relationships intact on the surface, it often came at the cost of your inner peace. You stayed agreeable, even when it meant abandoning yourself. What makes this experience especially confusing is that conditional love is often presented as discipline, guidance, or care. It is rarely labeled as conditional, but the impact remains the same. You grow up believing that love must be secured, not trusted. You stay alert, even in closeness. You measure your words. You monitor your actions. You fear that one misstep could undo everything. This is why disappointment may affect you deeply, and why rejection, even subtle, may feel heavier than it seems. It is not because you are fragile. It is because your nervous system remembers what it once meant to lose emotional safety. Conditional love trained you to anticipate loss even when none is intended. It taught you to hold on tightly, even when holding on hurts. But here is the truth that must be spoken. Love that requires you to disappear is not love that heals. Care that demands silence is not care that nurtures. What you experienced was not your fault, and adapting to it was not a failure. It was intelligence. It was resilience. You learned how to survive emotional uncertainty with grace and restraint. Yet survival is not the same as fulfillment. You are allowed to unlearn what no longer serves you. You are allowed to receive love without proving yourself. You are allowed to take up space without fear of abandonment. This keynote is not about resentment. It is about recognition. When you see how conditional love shaped you, you stop blaming yourself for the patterns you carry. Love does not have to be earned through exhaustion. Connection does not have to be maintained through self-erasure. And the moment you begin to believe that, you take a quiet but powerful step away from the past and toward a future where love feels like safety, not a test, the voice you silence to keep order. At some point, you realize that speaking up changed the atmosphere. A question could create tension, an opinion could invite discomfort, an emotion could disrupt balance. And so, without anyone formally instructing you, you learned restraint. You learned that quiet kept things stable. Silence preserved order. Your voice did not disappear suddenly. It faded gradually, replaced by observation, patience, and self-control. What looked like maturity was, in truth, adaptation. As a child, you sensed that the environment could not hold your full truth. There was already enough weight in the room, enough emotion without adding yours to it. So you minimized yourself. You learned to listen more than you spoke, to agree more than you challenged, to understand more than you expressed. You told yourself that this was kindness, that this was being reasonable, but beneath that reasoning lived a quiet fear that your voice might make things worse. You became skilled at maintaining calm by carrying discomfort internally. When something hurt, you processed it alone. When something felt unfair, you justified it. When something confused you, you stayed silent. Not because you lacked words, but because you learned that words had consequences. You watched what happened when others spoke honestly, and you learned from it. Silence became a form of protection. Over time, this self-silencing shaped your identity. You became easy, understanding, low maintenance. People admired your composure, unaware of the cost it demanded. You were praised for being calm in moments that should have allowed emotion. You were seen as wise for not reacting. But wisdom without expression becomes isolation. You carried clarity without release, awareness without relief. This pattern did not remain in childhood. It followed you into adulthood, into relationships, workplaces, and friendships. You may hesitate before sharing your thoughts, even when they matter. You may rehearse conversations in your mind and then decide they are not worth having. You may feel your voice rise inside you and then push it back down, choosing peace on the outside over honesty within. What makes this especially painful is that you often blame yourself for it. You may think you lack confidence, that you overthink, that you are too cautious. But this is not insecurity, it is conditioning. Your voice was not silenced because it lacked value. It was silenced because the environment could not safely receive it. You learned to keep order by keeping yourself small. This self-erasure can create a strange disconnection from your own needs. When you spend years prioritizing stability over truth, you begin to lose track of what you actually want. You know what others expect. You know what will keep things smooth. But when asked what you need, there is a pause. Not because the answer does not exist, but because you were never encouraged to look for it. Yet your voice did not vanish. It waited, it adapted, it learned patience, and now it may emerge in subtle ways, in exhaustion, in frustration, in the quiet sense that something is missing. These are not signs of weakness, they are signals. They are reminders that silence was a strategy, not a destiny. Reclaiming your voice does not mean becoming loud or confrontational. It means becoming honest. It means allowing yourself to take up emotional space without apology. It means trusting that expression does not automatically lead to chaos. This is difficult when your past taught you otherwise, but it is possible. This keynote is about honoring the child who stayed quiet to keep peace and giving the adult permission to speak with intention. Order does not require self-sacrifice. Calm does not demand silence, and your voice, once muted for survival, can now become a tool for clarity, boundaries, and healing. Why chaos feels familiar? Chaos does not always arrive loudly. Sometimes it lives in tone, in tension, in unpredictability that becomes routine. When this is the environment you grow up in, your system adapts to it as normal. Not healthy, but familiar. Your body learns its rhythms. Your mind learns its patterns. And long before you can name what is happening, familiarity begins to feel like comfort, even when it hurts. As a child, you did not choose disorder. You adjusted to it. You learned how to function inside emotional uncertainty. You learned that calm moments were temporary, that stability could shift without warning. So you stayed alert. You prepared for change. You expected disruption. Over time, this expectation became automatic. Your nervous system learned to stay active, even in moments that should have allowed rest. This is why peace can feel unsettling later in life. When things are quiet, when relationships are steady, when no one is demanding your attention, your body may not relax. It may search. Search for problems, for signals, for the next disturbance. Stillness feels unfamiliar because your early experiences did not teach you that stillness was safe. They taught you that calm was fragile. You may notice this pattern in your choices. You may feel drawn to intense situations, emotionally complex people, or environments that require constant effort. Not because you enjoy struggle, but because your system recognizes it. Chaos feels readable. You know how to move inside it. Peace, on the other hand, asks you to slow down, and slowing down can feel exposed when your instincts were built for endurance. This does not mean you are broken or self-destructive. It means you were trained to respond quickly, to adapt, to manage unpredictability. These skills kept you functioning in an unstable environment, but when the environment changes, the training remains, and what once protected you can begin to exhaust you. Another reason chaos feels familiar is because it offers distraction. When everything is intense, there is no space to feel what was postponed. Survival does not allow reflection, but peace does. In quiet moments, unprocessed emotions may rise. Memories you had no time for may surface. And so, without realizing it, you may avoid calm, because calm asks you to face what was set aside. This can create confusion. You may intellectually want peace, stability, ease, yet emotionally feel restless within it. You may question your own judgment, wondering why you cannot fully enjoy what you worked so hard to achieve. But this conflict is not failure, it is transition. Your system is learning a new language. It is important to understand that familiarity is not the same as belonging. Just because chaos feels known does not mean it is where you thrive. It is simply where you were shaped, and shaping leaves marks. Recognizing those marks is not about self-criticism, it is about self-awareness. Learning peace requires patience. It requires allowing your body and mind to experience consistency without rushing to fill the space. It requires reminding yourself gently and repeatedly that calm does not equal danger. This is not an instant shift. It is a gradual retraining. This keynote is about compassion for your patterns. You are not drawn to chaos because you want to suffer. You are drawn to what your nervous system understands. But understanding can evolve. Familiarity can be rewritten. And over time, peace can stop feeling empty and start feeling safe. Choosing peace without seeking permission. For a long time, your life may have felt like a negotiation. A constant inner dialogue asking, is this allowed? Will this cause tension? Will this disappoint someone? You learned to move carefully, not because you lacked courage, but because peace always seemed to depend on others staying comfortable. And so even your healing felt like something that required approval. Choosing peace after such an upbringing is not dramatic. It does not announce itself loudly. It begins quietly, with a pause, with a boundary, with a decision to stop explaining yourself. It is not rebellion in the way people expect. It is withdrawal from cycles that no longer serve you. It is understanding that you do not need permission to protect your inner world. For someone raised in emotional instability, peace can feel selfish at first. You may feel guilt when you rest, when you say no, when you prioritize your well-being. This guilt is not a sign that you are doing something wrong. It is evidence of old conditioning. You were taught to manage others before managing yourself. Choosing peace challenges that training. You may also notice resistance, not only from others, but from within. Part of you may still believe that your role is to hold things together, to absorb tension, to remain available. Letting go of that role can feel like abandonment, even when it is necessary. But you are not abandoning anyone. You are returning responsibility to where it belongs. Choosing peace does not mean cutting off emotion or avoiding accountability. It means choosing clarity over chaos. It means responding instead of reacting. It means understanding that you can care without carrying everything. Peace is not distance, it is discernment. There may be moments when you question yourself, when silence from others feels heavy, when setting boundaries creates unfamiliar space. This is where many people retreat back into old patterns, not because they want dysfunction, but because familiarity feels safer than change. Staying committed to peace requires trusting that discomfort does not always mean danger. One of the most powerful shifts happens when you stop waiting to be understood. Not everyone will recognize your growth. Not everyone will respect your limits immediately. But peace does not require agreement. It requires alignment. Alignment with your values, your capacity, your truth. This choice reshapes how you move through the world. You begin to speak with intention instead of urgency. You choose environments that allow you to breathe. You release the need to fix what is not yours to fix. These are not acts of avoidance, they are acts of self-respect. Choosing peace is not about erasing the past, it is about learning from it. The strength you developed through survival does not disappear, it transforms. It becomes wisdom, restraint, clarity. You no longer use it to endure harm, you use it to build stability. This keynote closes with a simple truth. You are allowed to choose peace without justification. You do not need to explain your healing. You do not need to prove your exhaustion. The moment you stop seeking permission to be well, you step into a life that is no longer ruled by the past, but guided by awareness, balance, and quiet strength.